the narrative that's insisted upon by the woke left, let's say, but also by these woke capitalists, is that the emergency that confronts us on the environmental frontier is so cataclysmic that any and all emergency measures are not only thoroughly justified, but morally required. Now, I have a problem with that theory psychologically as well as technically. And so psychologically, I've been trying to figure out how you separate the wheat from the chaff on the leadership front, especially in the face of a real emergency, because emergencies do occur from time to time. But here's a rule of thumb. Everyone who's listening can try this out for themselves and see what they think. But if the emergency you're confronting terrifies you so badly that you're paralyzed into immobility or tempted to aggregate all the power to yourself and become a tyrant, then you have defined yourself as insufficient for the job. You should be able to maintain a calm head regardless of the impending emergency, because there's going to be emergencies. And if you become a tyrant during an emergency, then you're a tyrant. So that's the psychological issue. Even if there is an emergency, we shouldn't be aggregating power into an elite. And then there's a second element too, which is, what bloody emergency precisely? I've talked a lot to Bjorn Lomborg, for example, and many other people, I would say, as informed as Lomborg. And there's no evidence, even in the IPCC reports themselves, that there's going to be some apocalyptic turning point in the next 50 years that justifies untold trillions of panic dollars being spent while we simultaneously destabilize our power grids and increase the cost of electricity by up to 5 times and make ourselves, at least in Europe, much more reliable or much more reliant on Russia. And also throw poor people into poverty and risk the fossil fuel infrastructure that feeds half the planet, because people actually also don't understand that ammonia is made out of fossil fuel, and ammonia fertilizer feeds 4 billion people. And so anyways, you said 2008 Wall Street is guilty because of the bailouts. The lefties pushed them hard on the ethical front, and rightly so. They decide to turn to ESG, but then that's also amplified by this sense of apocalyptic climate doom. And so what's your formulation of the environmental challenges that confront us now? How do you construe that?
So I have more to say about the ESG story, but I gotta pause on what you just said. I just gotta pause on what you just said. It was really some really good stuff in there. Okay, so I just need to go. I'm gonna go one step further than you and draw a linkage between the psychological critique and the technical critique, because they're related, right? So the first thing you said was a humble and powerful point, which is even if there is some sort of existential apocalyptic issue, you should not want to entrust the people who are going to then wield tyrannical force to address it, not to mention the fact that the technical issue is itself a completely artificial one, right? It is grounded on false premises that deserve to be called out. And I can call those out. Bjorn Lomborg, Alex Epstein, others can call them out. We can go into all the details of that. But the point I want to make is that those two critiques that you just offered, spot on as they are deeply linked. And the reason is you were almost too charitable in that psychological account, in that actually the psychological account explains the fact that the entire climate agenda actually has nothing to do with the climate. It's not like this was a tyrannical response to a threat. If you really care about carbon emissions as the end-all be-all, okay, first of all, you'd be delineating which kind of carbon emissions matter. I don't subscribe to the tenets of this religion, but I understand this religion. I think it's worth understanding a religion even if you're not a practitioner. Even if you subscribe to this religion, there's a difference between methane leakage and carbon dioxide. Well, methane leakage is far worse in places like Russia and China. So then it should be a mystery that you want to shift carbon production from the United States, where you tell companies like Exxon and Chevron to stop producing, to places like China, like PetroChina on the other side of the world.
Yep.
And by the way, this is exactly what the ESG movement, it's like the apostles of this church, right? So this is nuts if you think that you care about reducing carbon emissions. And it's not even, as I was alluding to methane emissions before, it's not even net neutral. Methane, even if you subscribe to this crazy religion, is 80 times worse for global warming than carbon dioxide. So it's not even net neutral, it's worse. So that's the first breadcrumb that there's something else going on here.
The second breadcrumb that there's something else going on here is that same movement, certainly its apostles in the ESG movement, that are so hostile to carbon emissions, is also hostile to the best known form of carbon-free energy production known to mankind, which is nuclear energy, right? So that's the second little breadcrumb that suggests there's something else going on here. And the problem with nuclear energy in a nutshell is that nuclear energy might be too good at solving the alleged clean energy problem, such that it doesn't solve for the actual agenda, which is delivering equity between the West, America in particular, and the rest of the world to catch up. That's really what this climate
delivering
is all.
And delivering that power that we've been talking
of course,
about in the hands of the proper elite.